What's up everyone, and today I'm reading a deck profile on my Ogdoadic, or the name I much prefer to call it by, Abyss, because let's face it, Abyss is a better name than Ogdoadic, whatever. Anyways, let's get on to the video. First, I run the two Ogdoadic, the Ogdoadic Overlord. If this card is in your graveyard, you contribute 3 monsters, special summon this card, and once while this card is faced upon the field, quick effect, you can send all monsters from the field to the graveyard except monsters special summoned from the graveyard. So the way this deck works is that you want to send all your monsters to the grave and then special summon them from the grave to basically make them immune to this effect. So essentially you can, if all the monsters on your field are special summoned from the graveyard, you can just Regeki your opponent during their turn, which is pretty good. So that right there is a good effect. Although the rest of them kind of have some weird effects, as we'll soon see. I run the 1 Queen. Queen, if this card is in your graveyard, you contribute 2 monsters, special summon this card. If this monster is special summoned from your opponent's graveyard, if a monster is special summoned from your opponent's graveyard, you can send 1 card they control to the graveyard. If a monster is sent from your opponent's hand or deck to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 light or dark reptile monster from your graveyard. So same with Overlord, that summons itself from the grave. Most of the high level ones do. If your opponent special summons a monster from your graveyard, you can basically send 1 card they control. Now, the keyword here is send. So it doesn't destroy, so it can basically get past a lot of different cards that have protection. I also run the 1 King. If this card is in your graveyard, contribute 2 monsters, special summon this card, and if your opponent adds a card to the hand, you can send 1 random card from your hand to the graveyard. So instead of monsters, the king works on the hand. I run 1 Alert, the Ogdoadic Dark. If this card is in your graveyard, tribute 1 monster, special summon this card, then your opponent can add 1 monster from their graveyard to their hand. If this card is special summoned, you can target 2 of your banished monsters, including a reptile monster, return them to the graveyard. Now this one, the secondary effect's not all that important. It's mainly for the first effect, to get it to the field. Now, the one cool thing with, or the one, I guess, kind of bad thing, is that this deck, you want to go first, because your opponent's not going to have a monster in the grave unless they use a hand trap, in which case, if they summon it, they summon it. It's not going to be doing anything on the field, unless they're Gamma. I won the 1 Kerosene, same summoning requires as Alert. If this card is special summoned, you can target 1 level 4 lower Ogdoadic monster in your graveyard, special summon it. So it summons another one of your Ogdoadic from grave. Next, I run the 3 Nayu, one of the few that you actually run at 3. Nayu is actually pretty good. You send this card from your hand, or you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard to send 1 light reptile monster from your deck to the graveyard. And this card is normal special summon. You can add 1 Ogdoadic spell trap from your deck to your hand. This type of file, I really only run 2. I also run, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard to send a dark reptile monster from your deck to the graveyard, and if you control no monsters or you control an Ogdoadic monster, you can special summon this card from your graveyard, but banish it when it leaves the field. So this is essentially good for getting itself out onto the field, so you can then use it for your higher leveled Ogdoadic monsters. I also run 2 Flogos. I run the 2 Zoha, the Ogdoadic Boundless. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard or special summoned from the graveyard, you can activate this effect. Your opponent draws 1 card, and if they do, you add 1 Ogdoadic monster from your deck to your hand. Then each player sends 1 card from their hand to the graveyard. If this card is in your graveyard, you send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard, add this card to your hand. So this is also kind of good for getting your Ogdoadic monsters in the grave. And lastly, I run 3 Ash Blossom to round out the monsters. You don't really want to run a whole bunch of hand traps, mainly because if you have monsters with different types in the grave, then that's going to make one of the other cards I run basically useless. Moving on to the spells. I run the 3 Water Lily. Water Lily, you can send a reptile monster from your deck to the graveyard. Then if you have 5 or more reptile monsters with different names to your graveyard, you can special summon 1 reptile monster from your graveyard. It does not have to be the one you just sent. So what you want to do is you want to activate the Snake Strain before Water Lily. Speaking of Snake Strain, I run 3 of that. You discard 1 card, send 4 reptile monsters from your deck to the graveyard. And this, you want a bunch of reptiles in the grave, so it really works with this deck. And what you want to do is you want to activate Snake Strain and then activate the Water Lily. I run the the 3 trade-in. A lot of the, we essentially run 4 level 8s, so definitely having that extra draw power is useful. And if you want to add maybe another queen or king or something like that, this card just becomes even better. Also for draw power, I run the 3 Allure of Darkness, because we do have a bunch of darks in this deck. I run the 2 Viper's Rebirth. I only run 2 because if I use an Ash Blossom or go into a non-reptile extra deck monster, this card literally just becomes dead. For Reptile's Rebirth, if all monsters in your graveyard are reptile, target one non-tuner in your graveyard to special summon it, but destroy it during the end phase. So it's a weaker Monster Reborn. Speaking of Monster Reborn, and also the Foolish Burial. Moving on to the traps. I run the 2 Ogdoadic Calling. Calling, you special summon 2 tokens, or if you have 8 or more Ogdoadic monsters with different names in your graveyard, you can apply this effect instead. Special summon 2 reptile monsters with different names from your graveyard. I don't think we can activate that last effect technically. You mainly want it for the tokens to get out your higher level Ogdoadic monsters. Next, I run the 3 Dogmatic Punishment. Punishment, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls. Send one monster with an equal or higher attack from your extra deck to the graveyard. And if you do, destroy that monster. Until the end of your next turn after this card resolves, you can now special summon monsters from the extra deck. Which is fine, because we don't really use the extra deck too much. So you could probably also run something like Pot of Prosperity or Pot of Extravagance if you want to. Moving on to the extra deck. I run 2 King of Feral Imps. King of Feral Imps, once per turn you can detach 1 material from this card. Add 1 reptile monster from your deck to hand. So it is a searcher for your reptiles. The only thing is I don't go into this too often, mainly because unfortunately the Ogdoadic monsters aren't the fastest of getting monsters onto the field, especially for the level 4 monsters. The higher level ones you can get out much easier. I also run an Abyss Dweller and a Dugaris. Now for the higher ones, I run a Dingirsu, a Hope Harbinger, and a Hieratic Sky Dragon. And of course, since I do run 2 level 10s, you gotta put in the Rail Cannon Gustav Max. Onto the links, I do run an IP package with Masquerena, Unicorn, and Phoenix. I run 1 Reptilian Echidna. Echidna, if it is linked, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. Change its attack to 0, and during your main phase, if your opponent controls a monster with 0 attack, you can add reptile monsters with different names from your deck to your hand, up to the number of monsters your opponent controls with 0 attack. So you can always add at least 1 reptile. I also run the 1 Alien Shock Trooper M frame. It has a quick effect. You can discard 1 monster, place 8 counters equal to its original level on face-up monsters on the field. Distribute it as you wish. I've never heard a card just literally have the wording as you wish. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to the graveyard, you special summon 1 non-linked reptile monster with a different name from your graveyard up to the number of monsters your opponent controls with 8 counters. Next, I run the 1 Cosmic Slicer Zerol. This works with Alien Shock Trooper more so. Monsters your opponent controls with 8 counters are changed to defense position, and they cannot activate their effects. And since off of Shock Trooper, you're going to be sending probably one of your high leveled, at least ideally one of your higher leveled Ogdoadic monsters. So basically all monsters your opponent controls are going to have counter. And so this just allows you to completely negate their effects. You can also add 1 card from your deck to your hand that has an effect that places 8 counters on it. And you remove 2 8 counters from anywhere on the field to normal summon 1 reptile monster. So it's an additional summon on top of that, which is really good. So this is definitely going to be the Alien Shock Trooper and Slicer are probably, I'd say, a pretty big combo. Granted, going into both of them at the same time is not going to be the easiest thing. And lastly, I run an Oxus Code Talker to round it out. Did I just really say Oxus Code? Well, that's going to be it for this deck profile. What do you think of it? Do you think the deck's pretty good? Do you think it has potential? Do you want me to cover the FTK variant? Because this is not the FTK. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video I make. Bye.